Well, it's always a pleasure to be joined by our next guest. I really appreciate his insights. I was checking out Chasing It with he and Chase Daniel after the Ravens unfortunately lost. Yeah, we've been through it enough. We don't need to go through it again. We know what happened. But over at the 33rd team, they got a great podcast. He is Mr. Trey Wingo, and he's back with us now here on GCR. Trey, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's good to chat with you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time for us.
Glenn, and anytime. How are things in the Charm City right now?
They were a lot better 6 days ago. They were a lot better then. Great. Yeah,
Yeah,
I really appreciate your guys' perspective, both of you actually, and I think
yeah,
it follows. It's so easy, and the loudest and the people that say the most ridiculous things get the most attention. What I appreciate is that that's not always the case, and a few of the
yeah,
things that you guys were talking about that I really appreciated. One, I mean, as you said it straight up, and I don't know where the line is between how much the Chiefs did and how much the Ravens did in terms of getting to this result. But I did think that the Ravens conspired, and it was the one thing we kept saying all week last week. If the Ravens are going to lose, they have to conspire. They have to,
yeah.
and they did. They were more than willing conspirators in that. And before we get to Lamar Jackson, I absolutely thought it started with a bizarre game plan that they had either going in or went to in what felt like panic. And panic has been the word that I keep coming back to all week because it just seemed like it got away from everybody during the course of that game.
Glenn, I think you're right, and and we'll get to the Chiefs in a second because I think that the Chiefs did do a lot of things that sort of forced the Ravens to panic. But I put something up on my Instagram story before the game, and I said that the Ravens should win. They're the better team. They're at home. You have the MVP starting at quarterback. We assume the MVP starting at quarterback, and the number one scoring defense in the NFL against an offense that has struggled. They should win. And the one question I had was, here's what I know about Kansas City. They know how to handle the moment. I have no idea if the Ravens know how to handle that moment. And, the choke word is an easy one to sort of throw out there. I'm just looking at the empirical evidence. You had in the first half, Lamar completed 5 passes, one to himself.
Mm-hmm.
You had the number one scoring defense in the league that gave up 2 straight opening drive touchdowns to the Kansas City Chiefs, a team, by the way, that had really struggled in the red zone this year and was averaging just about 21.8 points per game. The Chiefs brought in the most penalized player in the NFL, their high-priced right tackle, Jawan Taylor, and they led the league in drops. Now, all of that should factor in favor of the Baltimore Ravens. Well, if you look at the game plan, there were 3 turnovers in that game, a Lamar Jackson fumble, which they skated by when Andy Reid sort of had a brain misfunction, didn't kick the field goal to go up 10 points early on the 4th and 1. You had 2 end zone turnovers. One, a really great play by L'Jarius Sneed, which was sort of karmic, I guess, because the week before, Mecole Hardman had done that to keep Buffalo in the game
Mm-hmm.
in the divisional win by the Chiefs up at Orchard Park. And then the late throw by Lamar into triple coverage, which was really, it was on, I think it was 2nd and 10. Was it not on that
Yeah.
throw? Or,
Yeah.
yeah, it was. That's a 4th down throw. That's not a 2nd down throw because you got to put it somewhere in 4th down. 4, count them, 4 personal foul penalties. And before we get into the refs were against us, I mean, if the refs were against the Chiefs, why would they wipe off a touchdown on 2nd and 14 that would have put them up 24-7 at the end of the half? So let's just throw that out. Each one of those penalties was egregious and obvious. I mean, Travis Kelce, veteran move, baited Van Noy into headbutting him. Easy call. Henry hitting Patrick Mahomes in the helmet, in the head, as he's trying to run by him. They're going to make that call every time. Jadeveon Clowney headbutting Patrick Mahomes on a drive. They're going to make that call every time. And then after the big Zay Flowers reception, what does he do? He stands over and taunts, and we can have the conversation about whether or not you should be allowed to do that. The
Yep.
rules say you can't.
Yep.
The rules say you can't. And then, of course, that pushed him back, and that led to the great play led by L'Jarius Sneed. So you have 3 turnovers, 4 personal foul penalties, and a game plan in which you drop back 82% of the time for a team that ran the ball 31 times in the regular season, the number one rushing defense. All of those things to me are indications that they got out of their comfort zone. And you can say, well, they were behind. So what? The Ravens are behind all the time. They rely on the things that they do best to win. Those things to me all were indications that as an organization, not just Lamar, and he had his issues, and we can talk about that, but the organization from coaching to discipline to turnovers, the moment got to them. It's the way it is.
It's what it felt like. Trey, you point out, and I thought that when in your podcast with Chase, he was right to point out, hey, we still need to praise the Chiefs. And I don't
Yeah.
think the Chiefs were overwhelming on Sunday. I don't know how it
No.
could. They didn't score a point in the second half. But I think that they showed the blueprint, and the lesson is you can't do this. And they didn't. They didn't screw up. They didn't
Yeah.
have those
Clean sheet.
moments,
No
right?
turnovers. No turnovers. Yeah.
Exactly right. And this is what it takes to beat a team that's been there before, that knows what they're doing, that's well coached. You can't screw up and think you're good enough to beat that team. To me, that was the lesson that came from this game of they knew,
Yeah.
just don't screw it up. Don't,
Yeah.
don't make the big mistake and we're going to be all right.
Bill Belichick has a great line, and obviously it's kind of weird that he's still looking for work, and that's a whole different discussion we can have. More games are lost in the NFL than won, and I definitely think that happened in the Lions Niners game. Brock Purdy was great in the second half, but you have a 17-point lead, you kind of have to give it up, by not doing anything right in the second half. The Chiefs defense was outstanding, and they're the number 2 scoring defense. They were the number 1 second half scoring defense, and they only gave up 3 points. They don't give up chunk plays. So they did a lot of things well, but you're right. After it got to 17-7, the Chiefs didn't get a ton of first downs in the second half. That defensive front was starting to dominate the Chiefs offensive line without Joe Tooney. And they really did what they needed to do. So, the Chiefs were sort of hanging on in the second half. They got a couple of first downs and were able to move the clock a little bit. And then they had the dagger play when they needed to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but they didn't beat themselves,
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing. You just can't have 2 turnovers in the red zone. You can't have 4 personal foul penalties, which extend drives. Like, those things are indications of the crucible being felt by that team. Instead of responding to the moment, it's being sort of overwhelmed by the moment. And I know the players won't say that and they won't feel it, but the proof is in the pudding. I mean, it's in the things that happened. And it's not saying they can't overcome it. It's just that they didn't. And they'll have to show that they can for someone to believe, okay, we understand that you understand now.
So Trey Wingo is with us here on GCR from the 33rd team. And Trey, that to me, that next step of this, look, we live in a society where everything is, goat and trash, right? Like you're either the greatest of all time or you're trash.
Which is
And
ridiculous.
it's
Let's be honest. It's
absurd.
ridiculous.
It's
Yes.
utterly absurd. The Lamar Jackson takeaway, he didn't play well enough. There's no getting around that. Was he
No.
garbage? No, he made
No.
plays. He wasn't good enough to win an AFC championship game, the first that he ever played in. But compounding that with his playoff history, it's easy to put him under this microscope. And I don't know what else. And being around this young man, seeing how he's driven, my takeaway is this stinks. It really does sting because you felt like you were the better team, but there's nothing about this young man that suggests to me that he won't be hell-bent, driven by having been there and had this happen, and have every reason to believe that he's going to put himself in these situations for the years to come, because there's no question about what a quality football player he is.
I agree. There are a lot of people that thought that Lamar going into this game was actually better than Patrick. Now, you know, I tend to believe, if you look at the numbers, Patrick Mahomes is on GOAT status, GOAT track. I mean, you go look at
Yeah.
the first 6 seasons compared to Brady, outside of Super Bowl wins, he's ahead of him in every single category, and he could tie him if they actually beat the 49ers in a couple of weeks. Lamar was not helped by the game plan. I believe that. I mean, how many times on Sunday did we see sort of a mush rush, and Lamar had all kinds of time to throw, and the secondary was doing a great job, and eventually he took off and made some plays with his feet. But again, I go back to why you throw it or drop back, because throw it, because a lot of those were Lamar Jackson improvised runs. Why you decide, even though you're only down 10, I mean, be who
Yep.
you are. You score 1 touchdown, it's a 3-point game. So it's not, to me, that's not an insurmountable lead. Um, Going 82% dropbacks for a team that was like on 3rd and 1, they dropped back and it was incompletion. Then they got a sack on 4th down to make it 4th and 3. Now they converted it. I understand that, but 3rd and 1, freaking shove it up in there twice.
Right.
You're going to get the yard.
Right.
You're dominating the line of scrimmage. So those things, as much as we'll focus on Lamar, and people will, I don't think he was helped by the way the game was called. I just don't.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think he's too good. Again, it's a bummer, right? Like this is where the
Yeah,
line for me as a talk show host and Trey, you'll understand that between being a fan and an analyst is very difficult. Like it's a bummer. It's a huge bummer. But this guy's good. He's
yeah,
really freaking good.
yeah.
The obvious parallel that's been brought up is the comparison to Peyton Manning, who started his career
Sure.
2-4 in the postseason. Like Matthew Stafford, it took nearly to the end of his career to win a Super Bowl. I think there's been some I don't know, goalpost moving maybe with Lamar
Yeah,
Jackson and how quickly we've tried to measure him and say either
correct.
you got to win a Super Bowl right now or you're worthless. I don't know how to
Yeah,
describe it. It stinks,
yeah.
and it would have been great for this city if they would have won, but I don't think it's a fair measurement to say Lamar Jackson hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, so he can't be as good as some of these other guys. Patrick Mahomes has won most of these recently.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's two ways to look at this, right? Like, Dan Marino doesn't need a Super Bowl ring for me to realize he's arguably one of the top five, if not top
Right.
four, three quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Just go look at how he played. I mean, 48 touchdowns in the 80s with the way they played defense and the things that you could do to wide receivers. Get out of here! Like, get out of here. And then you mentioned Patrick. The other part of this is there's a reason Charles Barkley only has one MVP. There
Hmm.
was a reason Karl Malone only had one MVP. The other guy was winning them all, like Michael Jordan. That's the problem here. As like same thing for Josh Allen, same thing for Joe Burrow. Like all these quarterbacks are excellent. They're excellent, except Michael Jordan is playing in Kansas City. Tiger
Yeah.
Woods is playing in Kansas City. This is the kind of thing we're talking about, and I hope it eases people's minds about Lamar Jackson. I did some numbers this week. One of the things about, and Baltimore's obviously a huge baseball town, and the Orioles are fantastic. So you guys will appreciate this or not because it'll bring back some bad memories. Derek Jeter's postseason career is ridiculous, right? He played in 158 postseason games, which is absurd. That's basically an entire baseball regular season of postseason games. And that's when you're facing the top two, occasionally top three pitcher on the staff, but you're getting their aces. And you're not getting hacks against fourth and fifth or spot starters, right? Those don't exist in the playoffs. In those 158 games, Derek Jeter hit 308, 20 home runs, 61 RBIs, 111 runs scored, 20 plus stolen bases. So
Mm.
basically, he had an MVP type campaign in his postseason career. Well, this was the 17th playoff game for Patrick Mahomes. In his 17 playoff games, the Chiefs are 14-3. He's accounted for 45 total touchdowns, passing and running. He has 8 giveaways in 17 playoff games. His completion percentage is 67%, higher than it is in the regular season. And his passer rating, and we all know it's a flawed stat, but it's still a measurement. His passer rating in postseason play is right around 107. Why is that significant? His regular season passer rating is 92.
Ah.
So against the best teams in football, including the number one scoring defense in Baltimore last season, he elevates his game to a different level. And so you have to take that into the equation. Sometimes the other guy is just better. And if you're going to beat him, you can't have 3 turnovers. You can't have 2 red zone turnovers. You can't have discipline issues, and you can't have wonky play calling. All of those things have to be perfect for your really, really, really good quarterback to beat arguably the best quarterback.
Right, how much criticism should John Harbaugh face? And I'm a, you
I
know,
Yeah,
I'm a Harbaugh guy, right? Like, and it's not. I like John Harbaugh. I just really like consistency. I really like the
yeah,
fact that the Baltimore Ravens are good year in and year out. I think it's absurd when someone suggests that John Harbaugh should be fired. But,
that's insane.
like I also understand that there has been not an overwhelming amount of playoff success since the Ravens won the Super Bowl in 2012. And I don't know how to articulate like I feel like I just keep saying like, yeah, they should win more in the playoffs, but on the other side of things, would he not want to have John Harbaugh as your head coach? Like, I don't know how to describe what the reasonable way is to view John Harbaugh, the good versus this one
Yeah.
thing that is fair, but I don't think is as significant as the good.
Yeah, listen. It reminds me a little bit of Andy Reid in Philadelphia, right? And Andy Reid was a consistent winner. I think they went to 5 NFC Championship games under
Yeah.
Andy Reid. They only won one of them, and then they lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots when the Patriots were the peak of. The Patriots then were what the Chiefs are now, in that situation. So and he's already had success. As you said, they won Super Bowl 47, and it was one of the weirdest Super Bowls I've ever been to. It was crazy. Here's the criticism I would have of John Harbaugh, and I think he would agree with this after Sunday's game. When Dick Vermeil was the head coach of the Rams, Mike Martz, when they were the greatest show on turf, Mike Martz was the offensive coordinator. Mad genius. Whoa. You had all these weapons. Aziz Akeem was your third wide receiver. You had Torrey Smith. It's not Torrey Smith.
Torrey
Torrey
Holt,
Holt.
yeah.
Torrey Smith played
We like
great.
Torrey Smith, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Torrey Holt, Oz Akeem, Isaac Bruce, who's in the Hall of Fame. I think Torrey will go into the Hall of Fame. Ernie Conwell is your tight end. You had a myriad of ways to attack. And every once in a while, Dick Vermeil would get on the headset to Mike Martz and say, hey, quit, if you're pardon the French, quit dicking around and give the ball to 28. 28 would be Marshall Faulk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Marshall Faulk was so key to that team. One year when Kurt Warner won the NFL MVP, the Rams voted Marshall the team MVP. Okay, that's how important Marshall was to this organization. The one criticism I would have of John Harbaugh, and if he did it, then it's a bigger criticism of Todd Monken. He needed to get on there and said, run the damn ball.
And what are we doing?
What are we doing? And he even said it at halftime. We need to go out to being us. We need to run the football, but they didn't.
Yep.
So the only criticism I would make of John Harbaugh in this situation is if he, in fact, didn't have that conversation with Todd Monken, why didn't he? Or if he did, why didn't they run the ball? And then that's a really whole other really fascinating discussion that Todd Monken will have to answer to. But that's the criticism I would say that is a fair one of John. Look, give me a guy that consistently gives us a chance to win. I'll take that over one appearance in an NFC Championship game for the Lions since 1991. I'll take the alternative knowing I'm going to get more opportunities, more at-bats, more reps. The one fair criticism to me would be, did you have that conversation? And if you didn't, why didn't you?
All right, Trey, last one. So everybody in Baltimore is saying, man, we don't even watch the Super Bowl now. You know how this goes, right? You're hurt, you're
Exactly.
stung. So sell folks in Baltimore why this is a particularly compelling Super Bowl.
Well, it's a repeat of Super Bowl 54 with a whole thing of like the Brock Purdy angle is fascinating. And I think right now the early line is the Niners by 2.5, 3 points.
Yeah.
Here's all I'll say. At this point, why would anyone bet against 15? Like, why would you do it? Like, if they don't have a total brain fart at the end of the 2021 AFC Championship game where they don't kick 3 points when they're on the first and goal with no timeouts, they probably win that one. So now we're talking about a team that's potentially going to the 5th straight Super Bowl. All right, that's the kind of thing we're looking at here. The Niners are probably a better team. Although I think the Chiefs actually defense might be playing better than the Niners defense right now because the Niners defense is getting gashed on the ground. And the Chiefs can run the ball with Isaiah Pacheco. They can do that. If Tooney's healthy, their interior three of Creed Humphrey, Joe Tooney, and Trey Smith are as good an interior three of any offensive line in football. Give me the reason to not think Patrick Mahomes is going to get it done. I'm going with that guy. Like,
I get it.
The way I would sell it is, and it's hard to swallow if you're an AFC team that's a contender, we're talking about institutional greatness. We're talking about legendary status here. 6 straight AFC Championship games. They hosted 5 in a row. The record is the Patriots in 8, but they never hosted more than 3 in a row. I mean, we're seeing things that have never been done before. And if you go look at Patrick's first 6 years and compare them to the person everybody considers the GOAT, Tom Brady, he is so far ahead of him in every category except one. He has 2 Super Bowl rings. Brady had 3 in his first 6 years. If he gets this one, he'll have the same number of wins and Super Bowls and more appearances in Super Bowls than Tom Brady. He has a better regular season record, a better playoff record than Tom Brady over that time frame, a massive advantage in touchdown passes versus interceptions, and his passer rating is almost 20 points higher than Tom Brady at this point.
Really nuts.
So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about legendary things that are happening. And if you appreciate football, and I know Baltimore is so ingrained in the NFL, going back to everything they've done, from the title game against the Giants, which was called the game of the century, and all of this stuff. If you're a passionate football fan, just recognize what you're seeing because we may never see the likes of this again.
Trey Wingo, what can I plug for you, my friend?
Thanks, Glenn. We're doing the 3013 stuff with that. Check out the website and also my podcast with Chase Daniel. We're working on this app called the Stunt app. Myself and Mark Schler, do a show every week. Tuesday Trivia, by the way, comes your way on the Stunt app Tuesday and Thursday. It's basically a Twitter platform without all the garbage of Twitter. It's just sports. They don't care what your political beliefs are. They don't care what your fashion sense is. They don't want to know what you had for breakfast or how good your lasagna is. Just it's sports, and they give you a platform to share your views and build your own brand. So download the Stunt app in the Google Play Store on Android or the App Store on an iPhone. Also have a new podcast coming up with my old co-host Kevin Frazier at
Ah,
Sports
he
Center
used to be here
called
in Baltimore. We love Kevin.
yeah,
Yeah.
alternate routes. The whole premise of the show is what if you take one thing uh, and it goes the other way. Let's do a Baltimore example. What happens if Jeffrey Mayer is called for pass interference in that game? How does that change the Orioles? How does that change the dynasty that we talked about with the Yankees? We extrapolate this thing completely in a million different ways. What happens if Jacoby Jones doesn't make that catch against the Broncos in the fourth quarter when Raheem Moore gave up the sideline and the deep ball, which is still beyond me? How does that change? Does Peyton Manning win more Super Bowls than he already did? Like, take one moment in time, flip it the other way, and the ripple effects are amazing. One of them, and I'm going on too long here, but 1979, top of the NBA draft, the Bulls and the Lakers had a coin flip to decide who would get the number one pick. Lakers won the coin flip, and they got Magic Johnson.
Yep.
Showtime Lakers began. What happens if the Bulls get that? Michael Jordan never goes to Chicago. They're not drafting that high because they're going to have success with Magic Johnson. Does Michael Jordan become the thing that he became? Does it become something different? Does Phil Jackson ever exist? Does Pat Riley ever exist with the Showtime Lakers? We have one scenario in that one where we extrapolate it out. Charles Barkley then becomes the first black president of the United States instead of Barack Obama. It makes sense. It makes sense if you follow the steps. So that's the whole point of it. You take one moment in sports and flip it the other way and see how crazily things change.
Man, that's that. You know what? You got me. I'm hook, line, and
Yeah.
sinker. I'm all in. At Wingo Z.
Alternate Routes is the name, and it's going to drop in March. Amazon, Wondery, wherever you get your podcasts.
And
Alternate Routes.
we love Kevin. Used to be at Fox 45 here. Great dude.
Yeah.
At Wingo Z on Twitter is how you follow him. Always appreciate you, Trey. Thank you so much.
You got it, Glenn. Take care, buddy.